Two of the most powerful women in New York knew exactly who I was long before I ever crossed that threshold. I was the only one unaware that I'd already been studied, measured, and quietly placed into a decision I hadn't agreed to. The invitation arrived on a Thursday, not through any system I recognized. Not a message or a meeting request, but something deliberate. A cream-colored card, heavy and deliberate in my hands, appeared beneath my keyboard as if it had been slipped there in the space between my attention and someone else's intention. My name was written across it in impossibly precise ink, too perfect to feel accidental. Seohayan, Executive Retreat, Blue Ridge Estate. Friday 7 p.m., attendance is not optional. I read it again and again, searching for something hidden between the lines, some explanation that would make it ordinary. When I finally looked up, the office carried on as if nothing had shifted. Analysts leaned into their screens. Conversations stayed low and contained, and behind the glass walls of the corner office stood Kang Sojin, her back turned, her presence somehow filling the entire floor anyway. No one met my gaze. That silence said more than any answer could have. 14 months at Hansung Capital had taught me the invisible structure of the place. I knew which elevator saved seconds, which coffee machine could be trusted, which rooms carried sound through their walls. More importantly, I understood the rule no one ever spoke aloud. You did not come to Kang Sojin's attention unless something about you had already been decided. She was the kind of woman who altered a room without moving. 41. Chief Investment Officer. The person summoned when failing deals needed a colder hand than anyone else could offer. I had watched her dismantle chaos simply by existing within it. Voices lowering, tension dissolving into something quieter, something controlled. She never forced authority. She made it inevitable. For 14 months, I had existed carefully outside her notice. Precise, efficient, forgettable by design. The card erased that safety in an instant, and the absence of an explanation made it worse. I told myself it meant nothing. That retreats were routine. That sometimes junior analysts were included for reasons that had nothing to do with them. I packed that night with steady hands, ignoring the way my heartbeat refused to settle into anything predictable. I called it nerves. It wasn't Blue Ridge Estate waited 2 hours beyond the city, where the road narrowed and the trees pressed in close enough to feel deliberate. By the time we reached the gates, the last light had already disappeared behind the mountains. Gravel shifted underfoot as we stepped out, a small group against something vast and quiet, the house emerging from darkness as if it had always been there, simply waiting for us to arrive. She was the first thing that broke through the stillness. Lim Chayong stood on the stone steps, a glass of red wine balanced easily in her hand, laughing at something the estate manager had said. Creative director, architect of the image that made the empire believable, the warmth behind its power. Her laugh didn't feel practiced. It wasn't shaped for effect or approval. It was real in a way that didn't belong in rooms like these, reaching her eyes, softening the edges of her face, existing without permission. It stopped me in place. Then she looked at me. The laughter didn't disappear, but something beneath it shifted, something quick and unreadable, too layered for a first glance between strangers. She was the one who looked away first, lifting her glass as if nothing had changed. I told myself it meant nothing. The evening unfolded exactly as it was meant to. Dinner, conversation, the illusion of ease, carefully maintained. I kept myself small within it, speaking only when necessary, offering just enough to belong without becoming visible. It was a role I understood perfectly. Sojin arrived late. She didn't acknowledge it, didn't need to. The room adjusted the moment she stepped inside, conversations cutting off mid-breath as she took her place at the head of the table. Time bent around her in a way that made everything else feel secondary. She spoke with quiet precision, outlining numbers and strategy in a voice that drew attention without demanding it. People leaned in without realizing they had moved. I focused on the surface of my water glass, refusing to give away the awareness building under my skin. Still, I felt it. The exact second her gaze reached me, it wasn't obvious, just a pause, barely longer than it should have been, her eyes resting on me for a fraction of a moment before continuing on. Half a second. That was all. My pulse registered it instantly, even as my mind tried to dismiss it as nothing. After dinner, the group drifted toward the common room, voices softening into something more casual. I stepped away instead, following a narrow stone path into the garden where the air was colder, cleaner, stripped of the noise inside. I needed distance from whatever had started shifting inside me. The path curved, and then they were there. Sojin and Chaeyoung stood close in the dark, their voices low, their conversation ending the moment my presence reached them. Seojin's expression sealed instantly, controlled and unreadable. Chaeyoung's reaction came slower, something flickering across her face before she tucked it away behind a careful smile. Silence stretched between us, heavy enough to feel deliberate. Then Seojin spoke my name, not as a greeting, not as a question. As confirmation. Chaeyoung turned slightly, her warmth returning too quickly, too perfectly. Her fingers tightened around her glass, the only sign of something unguarded slipping through. They had been talking about me. Not just in that moment, but before, long before. The ease with which they recovered made that clear. My name already existed in whatever space they shared. Something discussed, examined, considered without my knowledge. What unsettled me wasn't what they had said. It was how long they had been saying it. Standing there, caught between Seojin's steady, unreadable focus and Chaeyoung's carefully redirected attention. Something shifted inside me for the first time in 14 months. I wasn't invisible anymore, I was seen. Completely, dangerously seen, and in that moment, it became clear that nothing about my life at Hansung Capital was going to remain untouched by it. No one mentioned a second purpose for the retreat. No one ever did. Women like them didn't explain their intentions. They shaped circumstances until resistance felt pointless, until whatever they wanted became the only outcome that made sense. That night, sleep never really came. The estate breathed around me, wood settling, wind brushing against the windows, the distant quiet of the mountains pressing in. Everything about the room was perfect in a way that felt almost impersonal, as if it existed for display rather than comfort. Sojin's voice echoed in my mind, the way she had said my name like it meant something specific, something already decided. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I had imagined the weight behind it, that someone like her had no reason to focus on someone like me. The thought almost settled. Almost morning arrived wrapped in gray mist, the valley hidden beneath it. I chose a seat at the back of the glass-walled dining room, hoping for distance, for anonymity, for a return to something familiar. Chaeyoung entered minutes later. The room was half empty, space everywhere. Choices that would have kept things neutral, distant, safe. She walked past all of them, and sat directly across from me. Her coffee touched the table with quiet certainty as her eyes lifted to meet mine, warm on the surface, something far more complex moving just beneath. "You're Hyan," she said, as if we were picking up a conversation that had been paused somewhere I couldn't remember. "I am," I answered, careful with the word, as if it might reveal more than I intended. Her smile followed, the same one from the night before, effortless and disarming in ways that didn't belong in a professional setting. It reached too far, softened too much, made something in my chest shift before I could stop it. "I've read your work," she continued, her voice calm, almost conversational. "Your quarterly assessments, the meridian restructuring analysis you submitted in March." A brief pause settled between us, deliberate. It was the best thing that crossed my desk all year. The statement landed without warning. I had no place to put it, no prepared response for something like that. Creative directors didn't review analyst reports. That wasn't how the structure worked. "We don't usually," she added, as if she had been following the exact direction of my thoughts. Her hands wrapped around her mug, fingers steady, nails painted a deep burgundy. One small chip marked her left thumb, a tiny imperfection she hadn't bothered to correct. It made her feel unexpectedly real, and that made her more dangerous. "I asked for yours." The silence stretched, pressing into the space between us until it demanded something in return. "Why?" She held my gaze longer than necessary. Something moved behind her eyes, something measured and withheld at the same time. Seojin wanted a second opinion. The explanation settled without clarifying anything. Before I could follow it further, she stood, lifting her coffee with quiet ease, and moved away toward a group near the window, as if nothing had shifted at all. But something had. I stared at my cup, the words repeating in my mind. A second opinion on me. The morning session unfolded in structured precision, leadership exercises and controlled simulations designed to mimic pressure without ever truly creating it. I moved through it automatically, contributing when required, keeping my tone measured, my expression neutral. It was a performance I knew well. Still, awareness lingered beneath it. Not constant, not obvious, but present in a way that couldn't be ignored. Seojin's attention wasn't something you caught directly. It was something you felt, like a change in atmosphere before a storm. Subtle shifts in the room followed certain moments, certain statements, and every time I looked up, her gaze was already elsewhere, composed and unhurried, as if she had never been watching at all. It made my skin feel too tight. By afternoon, the mist had lifted, revealing the estate paths in clear detail. Most of the group moved toward the terrace, drawn by light and open space. I chose the opposite direction, toward the garden where the walls curved inward and the trees grew close enough to create privacy. I needed distance. You walk like someone who's used to disappearing. Her voice reached me before I saw her. I stopped, turned, and found her alone on the path. No assistant, no interruption, just Seojin standing there in a charcoal coat, hands in her pockets, her expression composed in a way that revealed nothing and suggested everything. "I'm not disappearing," I said, steady. "I'm just going somewhere no one else is." A slight tilt of her head acknowledged the truth in that. She moved closer, not with force, never with force, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had never needed permission to close a distance. She stopped near enough that I noticed the scent first, something clean layered over something darker, sandalwood grounding it. Familiar in a way that made no sense, my breath shifted without consent. "Your meridian analysis," she said softly, "the section on emotional capital loss during hostile acquisitions." Her eyes held mine, steady and unreadable. "Where did that come from?" "Experience." The answer slipped out before it could be reshaped into something safer. Something flickered across her face, brief enough to almost be imagined. Not approval, not curiosity. Something closer to recognition, softer than anything I had expected from her. "Whose?" The word settled deeper, bypassing anything professional. It wasn't a question about data or analysis. It was something else entirely, something that didn't belong in this context. The wind moved through the trees, quiet and steady. She reached out then, unhurried, deliberate, and removed a small leaf caught in my hair. Her fingers never touched my skin, but they didn't need to. The space they passed through lingered, charged long after her hand withdrew. She stepped back, composure already restored. "Dinner is at 7. Nothing in her tone acknowledged what had just happened. She turned and walked away as if it had been nothing at all. My hand lifted slowly to the place she had almost touched. The absence of contact somehow more tangible than anything real. That was when I saw her. Chaeyoung stood near the garden entrance, still and silent. She had been there long enough to see everything. Her expression held no anger. It was something far more unsettling. A quiet, controlled shift, like someone recognizing a loss they hadn't admitted to wanting. That realization followed me back to my room, settling into every thought I tried to organize into something logical. I sat on the edge of the bed, replaying each moment, each choice, each intersection that had brought me into their orbit. None of it felt accidental anymore. This was a retreat, a professional environment, a hierarchy that should have made all of this impossible. Sojin existed 3 levels above me, separated by authority and distance. Chaeyoung had no reason to know my name, no reason to request my work. What I was feeling, what my body insisted on reacting to, had to be proximity, power, nothing more. I held on to that explanation as long as I could. It lasted until dinner. The room had changed. The table was smaller, deliberately rearranged to remove the comfort of distance. Fewer people, closer spacing, no room to disappear unnoticed. My name card placed me safely in the middle, neutral ground. I sat, allowing myself a quiet breath of relief. It didn't last. Chaeyoung appeared moments later and took the seat beside me. She glanced at the card in front of her, clearly not hers, then set it aside without hesitation and settled in as if the arrangement had always been meant that way. I focused on my empty glass. "You're doing it again," she said softly, unfolding her napkin with effortless ease. "Doing what?" "Deciding something isn't happening." Her tone carried no pressure, only quiet certainty. A sideways glance followed, her smile catching the candlelight. "You have a very specific expression when you argue with yourself." "I don't know what you mean." "You've said that twice," she replied, already reaching for the wine. She filled my glass before I could refuse, her movement smooth, unhurried. Both times while understanding exactly what I meant. The glass gave my hands something to occupy, something steady. Across the table, Sojin took her seat at the head without looking in my direction. The absence of attention pulled more focus than if she had given it. She spoke with the senior risk analyst beside her, composed and engaged, and then she laughed. It was quiet, genuine, unguarded in a way I hadn't heard before. The sound settled somewhere in my chest before I could dismiss it. "She doesn't do that often," Chaeyoung murmured. I realized too late that I had been watching. You were, she added, not accusing, simply observing. She swirled her wine slowly, her attention returning to me. She's been different this weekend, since you arrived. The conversation around us continued, silverware and voices blending into a steady background. But the space between us grew still, focused. I've known her for 11 years, Chaeyoung went on. I know what different looks like on her. You should be careful saying things like that, I said, quieter than intended, probably. There was no hesitation in her voice. You should be careful looking at her the way you do. She turned fully toward me then, her gaze direct, unwavering in the flickering light. But here we are. I set my glass down, the question leaving before I could contain it. What do you want from me? It sounded too exposed, too unguarded. Nothing like the version of myself I had maintained for 14 months. She studied me for a moment, something shifting beneath the warmth in her expression. Something deeper, more honest than anything she had shown so far. I haven't decided yet. The truth in it unsettled more than any calculated answer could have. I left before dessert. The hallway outside was dim and cool, the quiet wrapping around me as I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes, trying to steady the rhythm in my chest that refused to return to anything resembling control. 2 women, each dangerous in a completely different way, and me in the middle of it with no map, no preparation. Nothing but instinct that kept shifting beneath my feet. A junior analyst from a small apartment in Queens had no business standing at the center of something like this. Yet there I was, already too far inside to pretend it wasn't happening. All I needed was one more day. 36 hours. Then the city would take us back. Restore distance, rebuild the clean, professional boundaries that made everything manageable. You left early. Her voice cut through the quiet before I opened my eyes. Sojin stood at the far end of the hallway, a glass of water in her hand, watching me with that same controlled expression that never gave anything away, and still felt like it was asking something. I needed air. The hallway isn't air. Her reply came evenly as she moved closer, each step deliberate, precise, like it had been decided long before she took it. She stopped just within reach, close enough for the faint scent of sandalwood to settle around me again, familiar now in a way that felt dangerous. Your work is exceptional, she said quietly. You already know that, thank you. I'm not complimenting you. Her gaze held mine, steady, unflinching. I'm explaining why I chose you for this retreat. The words landed heavier than they should have. There are 30 analysts in your department, she continued. Your name is the one I wrote on that card. A brief pause followed, measured. I needed to know if you were the same in person as you are on paper. My throat tightened, the weight of her attention settling somewhere it couldn't be ignored. She studied me for a long moment, something unreadable passing through her eyes, before her gaze dropped briefly, just once, to my mouth and then returned. You're not, she said, softer now. You're more. The hallway felt impossibly still, the faint glow from the dining room stretching toward us without quite reaching. Then her phone vibrated. She glanced at it, and something dark flickered across her face, gone before it could be understood. Composure returned instantly, seamless and absolute. Good night, Haeyeon. She walked away like nothing had happened. I stayed where I was, back against the wall, pulse rising too fast, too loud, the echo of her words settling deeper than they should have. From behind the dining room door came the sound of Chaeyoung's laughter, cut short mid-breath, abrupt enough to feel like interruption rather than amusement. Like she had seen something. The storm arrived at midnight with intention. The window rattled hard enough to pull me from sleep, rain striking the glass in sharp, relentless waves. It didn't fall so much as attack, driven sideways by wind that made the entire structure groan. I sat in the dark, listening, convincing myself it was normal, that the mountains carried weather like this all the time, that nothing about the night meant anything beyond itself. Then the power went out. Darkness dropped completely, thick enough to feel like it had weight. My phone lit the space just enough to orient myself. Messages flooded the emergency group chat, instructions from the coordinator outlining the situation. Flooded roads, limited generator capacity, everyone moving to the east wing where heat could be maintained. Consolidate, the word lingered. I grabbed a blanket, stepped into the hallway, and followed the dim glow of emergency lighting toward the common room. A few others were already there. Laptops open, pretending inconvenience could be turned into productivity. Candles flickered across the low tables, tea set neatly beside them. the fireplace casting uneven light that made the room feel smaller, closer. I took a chair near the window, pulling my knees in, watching the storm tear through the dark outside. For a moment, I almost felt calm. Then Seojin entered. She had changed. The sharp structure of her usual presence softened into something simpler, dark trousers, and a loose cream sweater that belonged to a version of her no one in the office ever saw. Her hair was down, altering the lines of her face in a way that made her feel less distant, more real, and somehow more dangerous because of it. Her gaze found me immediately, without searching, without effort. She crossed the room and chose the chair beside mine, not across. Beside. Close enough that the space between us felt intentional. I kept my attention on the window. "Couldn't sleep?" I said, filling the silence before it shaped itself into something else. Neither could I. Her voice carried no strain, only quiet honesty as she watched the storm. "I don't sleep well when things are outside my control. Is that often?" A pause followed. Less than it used to be. Another, smaller pause. "More than this week." I turned toward her then. That was the mistake. In the firelight, without distance, without the structure of the office to contain her, she looked different. Still composed, still controlled, but beneath it something heavier showed through. Something worn. Something that had been carried too long. I looked away, back to the window. "You should understand," she said quietly. "I don't make personal decisions without care." My hands tightened slightly against my knees. This wasn't just observation anymore. "I'm trying to determine something," she continued. Distance makes that difficult. Laughter from across the room broke through briefly, ordinary and distant, only emphasizing how sealed off the space around us felt. "If the answer isn't simple," I said slowly, "then what happens? I handle it." Her tone didn't shift. "Everything I've built exists because I handle what isn't simple. People aren't numbers." "No." Something deeper moved through her voice. "They're harder and worth more." The fire shifted, light dimming and returning. 2 inches separated our knees, and those 2 inches carried more weight than they should have. Then the door opened. Chaeyoung stepped inside. She paused, just for a fraction of a second, long enough for something unguarded to surface, before it disappeared behind her usual warmth. She carried 2 mugs, which meant she had been awake, thinking, choosing. Her eyes moved from me to Seojin, to the space between us, taking in everything without needing it explained. Then she crossed the room and sat on the floor directly in front of us, back against the table, knees drawn in. She held out the mugs without speaking. Sojin took one. I took the other. The 3 of us settled into the quiet, the storm pressing against the windows, the fire flickering, the rest of the room fading into background noise. Chaeyoung stared into the flames. "I used to love storms," she said softly. "When I was younger, my grandmother had a house near the coast. We would sit on the porch and watch the rain come in. A faint smile touched her lips, but it didn't stay. It was the only time everything stopped. Silence followed, steady and heavy. That changed," she added after a moment, her voice quieter now. "I stopped having places where stopping felt safe." The fire cracked sharply. Beside me, Seojin's hand shifted. Her fingers came to rest over mine, not gripping, not asking, just there. Warm, steady, deliberate. My breath stalled. Chaeyoung saw it. Her gaze moved from our hands to my face. Something breaking open briefly in her expression before she turned back to the fire. It wasn't anger. It was something far heavier. Grief. Quiet and certain. Like she was watching something unfold that she had already accepted. Something she might have even set in motion herself. The storm outside grew louder, but it wasn't what filled my ears. My pulse drowned everything else out, steady and undeniable. Marking the exact moment everything shifted beyond anything I could still pretend to control. Sojin's hand rested over mine, warm and steady, as if it had always belonged there. Across from us, Chaeyoung's face flickered in the firelight, amber and controlled, her gaze fixed somewhere else with deliberate care. Then her voice slipped into the space between us, soft enough to belong to the storm, to the fire, to anything except the moment itself. "I should have told you sooner, Hyeon." The pressure of Seojin's hand shifted barely, but enough for me to feel it. "Told me what?" Chaeyoung inhaled, lips parting, and the generator died. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Only the fire remained, thin and unsteady, casting fragments of light that made everything feel closer, sharper. Sojin's hand tightened around mine, no longer measured, no longer controlled. It was instinctive now, urgent across the room. Voices broke into startled fragments, something knocked over, nervous laughter trying to fill the gap. Through it all, Chaeyoung's voice reached me. Low, Close, only for me. They didn't choose you for this retreat, Hyun. A pause that felt endless. We did. 2 words and everything rearranged. The dark held them there, suspended between us, reshaping every moment that had led here. When the generator returned and light flooded back in, the room recovered its shape, its normal rhythm, its illusion of control. I didn't. Cold settled in my chest. Not shock, but clarity, the kind that comes when scattered pieces finally lock into place. Seojin's hand left mine, and the absence was immediate, absolute. I stood. Hyun, not here. My voice held steady, stronger than I felt. I looked at both of them. Seojin composed but watchful, Chaeyoung struggling to keep something from breaking through. Not with an audience. I walked out. They followed. The hallway outside was stripped of softness, lit by a single harsh fixture that left no room for shadows to hide in. The storm pressed against the windows at the far end, loud and relentless, but inside it was just the 3 of us and the truth that had nowhere left to go. I turned. How long? A glance passed between them, heavy with something practiced, something unresolved. 8 months, Seojin said. The number landed harder than anything else. My work came across her desk during the Meridian Review, she continued, her voice controlled, professional, the tone she used when something underneath it needed restraint. The emotional capital analysis. I've reviewed thousands of reports. No one writes about loss the way you do. A pause followed. I needed to understand why, so you investigated me. I researched you. The distinction mattered to her. It's the same thing, it isn't. A subtle shift tightened her expression. Investigation looks for flaws. I wasn't looking for flaws. Silence stretched, filled with everything she didn't say. For what? She didn't answer. Chaeyoung stepped in instead, her voice quieter now, steadier in a different way. When she called me 8 months ago, she told me there was someone I needed to see. A slow breath left her. That was the 2nd time in 11 years she's ever said that. The weight of it settled before the answer came. The first was me. The space around us seemed to narrow. I leaned back against the wall, grounding myself against something solid, so the retreat was real. It is, Seojin said quickly. Everything here is real. Everyone else was selected normally. But I wasn't. No, Chaeyoung said softly. The truth sat between us, undeniable. Why not just speak to me in the office? Because in the office you disappear. Her voice cracked slightly, just enough to reveal how much she had been holding back. I watched you for 3 months after she called me. You're extraordinary, and you make yourself invisible. Every time someone notices you, you shrink away from it. You deflect, minimize, erase yourself before anyone else can define you. Her eyes held mine, bright with something too real. If we approached you there, you would have vanished so completely we never would have reached you. The truth of it landed harder than I wanted it to. That doesn't make this right. No, Seojin said evenly. It doesn't. The honesty stopped me. No defense, no justification, no attempt to reshape it into something acceptable. Just acknowledgement. Why now? Another look passed between them, heavier than the rest. Because something changed, Seojin said. And you need to know before it reaches you in a way we can't control. Tension tightened in my chest. Chaeyoung pulled her phone from her pocket and turned the screen toward me, an email. Sent 3 days ago. Addressed to a board contact I didn't recognize. The subject line carried my name, conflict of interest disclosure. I read it once, then again, each line more precise than the last, constructed with deliberate care. It outlined a narrative I had never lived, detailing inappropriate connections with senior leadership, suggesting my work had been guided, that my presence here was evidence of favoritism, a violation waiting to be exposed. Every sentence was believable. Every sentence was a lie. Who sent this? Seojin's expression shifted, something closer to anger breaking through her control. We don't know. But whoever did has access to internal systems. Someone inside the company, yes. The implications unfolded quickly. Someone who knew we'd all be here, yes. Someone who knew about. The thought stopped before it could finish. There's nothing to know. Someone anticipated it, Chaeyoung said carefully, before it became something real. Cold spread further. They were watching before any of this started. Yes, I stared at the screen, at my name attached to something designed to destroy it. My career. It won't reach the board, Seojin said, her voice low, absolute. I won't allow it. You can't promise that. I met her gaze directly. You're already part of it. Any protection from you only strengthens the accusation. My hands trembled. I pressed them flat against my legs. This was built so your involvement makes me look guilty. Silence confirmed it. Chaeyoung reached for me. I stepped back, not because I didn't want it, but because I did too much. Who else knew? Neither of them answered immediately. That matters, I said, sharper now. Who else knew you were both? Interested. Another glance. Too long. There's more, Seojin said finally. Something we found this morning. The storm hit the windows harder, filling the pause. Your personnel file, Chaeyoung said. It was accessed 6 months ago, before Seojin showed it to me. Before either of us acted. The meaning settled slowly, then all at once. Someone else was looking at you first. Breath stalled in my chest, not just watching, not just reacting. Someone had been there before either of them, moving quietly, arranging pieces long before I ever realized I was part of something larger. Every moment that had felt coincidental, every interaction that seemed spontaneous, all of it now carried the weight of intention I hadn't seen. Seojin and Chaeyoung thought they had chosen me. But the truth pressed in from another direction entirely. Someone else had been there first. Watching. Planning. Waiting. And whatever this was, whatever had been set in motion long before I stepped into it, had never been about chance.